Greenery plays a key role in landscape painting, and beginners tend to struggle with them. But when you search how to paint trees or greeneries, you tend to find tutorials that either show you how to paint a single tree on a blank sheet of paper as if the surroundings don't matter, or you may see a painting demonstration based on just one photo. This way of learning to paint greeneries falls short because it fails to recognize the real key in mastering greeneries in landscape, which is not a matter of learning the techniques, rather it's about learning the pattern matching. Pattern matching meaning that you understand exactly the goal you're looking for with the greeneries in the scene, and you know what exact visual treatment to deploy in order to achieve that goal. If you look at the work of master painters, you sometimes see their greeneries don't look exactly like trees, grasses, or bushes, but rather are abstracted shapes, textures, colors, and values that create visual contrast. Maybe only a few leaves and branches were depicted, and the rest is all suggested. That level of confidence stems from ultimately knowing the answer to this one question. What roles do I want the greeneries to play in this painting? But once you start asking yourself that question of what roles you want the greeneries in each areas of the painting to play as a whole, you will start to realize that you have to place focus on certain areas and downplay the visual emphasis of other areas. At the same time, you may also realize that, wait a second, I actually don't know how to approach a specific area. For example, how do I depict an ocean of wildflowers without painting the flowers individually? Or how do I create rich textures while also suggesting this is a forest or a hillside? So this is what I'm going to do today in this video, is to help you break down the specific roles that greeneries can play in a landscape painting, as well as the different visual treatment you can apply based on the roles you have identified. First, a quick announcement that I will be teaching 2 deep dive workshops through my Patreon online program in October and November, where I will go much deeper and show you step-by-step process based on challenging photos submitted by the class. The October class, which is based on my last YouTube video, tackles painting trees as a focal subject and doing it well by abstracting necessary shapes from photos and utilizing intentional brushstrokes to achieve a loose and fresh look. November class is all about learning the different visual treatment and knowing when to apply them, specifically to create dynamic looking compositions. Now, if you are a Patreon class member, these workshops will be entirely free. You can also sign up as a one-off workshop through my website. Check out the links to both of these workshops here or in description below. All right, let's get cracking and take a look at different roles greeneries can play in your landscape painting and different visual treatment you can use to depict them. The first role that greeneries play is to help create depth and atmosphere, often depicted in abstract forms with soft blending textures, and also has a much lower contrast compared to the focal subject. This treatment is effective when you want the backdrop to recede further into the distance, or there are other greeneries or tree subject in the foreground. In this photo, the trees in the foreground obviously are our hero subject. However, the tree lines in the distance, they can be painted with this specific treatment, where we basically just depict a band of jagged shapes on the horizon. And to maintain the soft edge in watercolor, you will paint this as you were tackling the sky. Because the contrast will be really low, you don't really need to add a lot of shadows, but do make sure the color you use is more muted of a green. This way, you're able to create that sense of depth more effectively. Here we have the finished scene, and you will see that we really do need the distant trees to be that abstract and simple in order for the focal trees to stand out in the foreground. Greeneries can also serve as textural elements in your painting. Create contrasting textures to other elements in the scene or support the focal point so that the focal point stands out more. Because foliage is a soft and fuzzy texture, By utilizing the soft textures, those harder edges will jump out much more, and wherever you place the hard edges, it becomes a natural stopping point for the viewer's eyes to land on. So they'll be jumping through the painting, noticing these high contrast, sharp edges, and that's how they can experience your work. However, sometimes we do want to shy away from using soft textures for every greenery subject, especially when we're depicting multiple layers of greenery. In this painting, while the background trees are soft, the parts of these brightly lit maple leaves were left out as a really bright tone. So the sharp edge can also be effective for calling out high contrast areas within the greenery subject itself. When painting trees this way, compared to the first method as a distant mass, this method does require painting out the light and the dark surface of the trees. First, paint the outline, just like you did in the first method, but make sure to avoid the houses so that the sharp edges of the buildings will stand out more once everything dries. And then use a much thicker consistency to paint the highlight area. If you also have some focal trees in the foreground, you will want to wait for the background mass to dry up more before you go in and fill in the foreground trees, so that it will still connect to the background through the soft edge, but visually stands out against it at the same time. Now, if you have tree clusters that are of different species, shapes, or colors, you may want to use these techniques where you just join the colors instead of painting them as one mass. This will create further separation between the objects. Meanwhile, it's also smart to make sure that some of these bushes will have dry brush marks and sharp edges, while others have softer edges. Remember, the sharp edges is where the viewers rest their eyes on. So in this composition, where the path zigzags across the painting, so we'll want to have a sharp brush mark or edges in each clusters at the corner of the path. Greeneries are often used as a compositional device because how diverse their shapes are and how expressive it can be. As we learned in the last video, trees can be characters. So it's about tapping into those movements and create visual pathways that help connect different areas in your painting. Winter trees without the leaves sometimes is more effective as getting this job done because they carry a more distinct movement, and the tree trunks typically are hard-edged, relatively dark against the backdrop. However, shapes is not the only thing that aids to the composition. The placement of the greeneries in your painting can also help you achieve similar results. For example, in this cityscape, the greenery permeates different parts of the painting because they are the highlight color as compared to the mostly gray and white subjects. Greeneries can also be used as a framing device where it will lead the way into the painting and help viewer focus on specific areas that the painters want them to. In this painting, if we were not to have the trees on the right hand, you wouldn't feel the street is narrow and steep. In this scene, where the side of the building is splitting the painting up into the left and right portion, it will be too strong of a division without the softening of the shape created by these trees in the foreground. For this painting, we'll have these very strong horizontal shapes of the landmass. Therefore, the tree branches on the lower right portion helps softening these large movement and also prevents viewers' attention from exiting the painting. Let's add some foreground trees to these two scenes we just painted. Because the subjects follow this upward trajectory from left to right, so the tree shapes can echo that movement and already created a momentum. When painting upward tree silhouettes, use energetic brush marks and flick your brush upward. For this scene with this pathway, because the viewer's eye follows the path and eventually will try to exit the painting, that's why we're adding these downward movement of the silhouette trees to slow down or to stop viewers' eye from exiting the painting and therefore hold their attention within the scene. This type of downward branches, the best way to paint it is flick your brush downwards, move quickly in order to create an energetic and loose feeling. It is quite common, however, in the real-life painting scenario that we need to use a variety of visual treatment and combine them in order to create a harmonic scene. Let's take a look at this photo submitted by our student Julianne, who said, the challenging part about greeneries is when you have greens on the ground, in the background, in the foreground, and really everywhere. So how to interpret different parts and depict them well becomes a challenge. So the way we're going to approach this one is first we're going to pick our focal point and try to use highest contrast and sharpest edges for that. That will be the backlit foliage of these trees on the right against the dark backdrop, and potentially we'll repeat that high contrast as well to the left where the bushes are brightly lit and the sun is behind them. Even though the tree trunks are dark, because how shadowed everything is in the foreground, we may be better off to leave the tree trunks light. So that is something you can do if you feel like the overall value is trending dark, because greeneries are typically in the mid to dark tone range. The bushes flanking the path, they are too repeated, and therefore we're going to crop a big portion out of it so that we can hone in on the focal point we have chosen. And when we start, we're going to apply the light tone to the entire painting. Once everything dries, then the first step is to carve out those sharp edges of the brightly lit foliage by painting the backdrop negatively, avoiding the bright leaves so that their shapes are super distinct and the contrast is at the highest. Note that I've used a second brush to spot wet certain areas as I paint the background. This is again to create softer textures that will have less of a visual prominence than the sharper areas. I'm using the soft but still distinguishable method for the bushes in the foreground, focusing on separating each rounded clusters, but not get so caught up on the individual leaves or textures. The dark tone will also apply to the dappled shadow on the path, as well as the shadows onto the bushes flanking the path. This is where spot wetting can also be helpful, because the shadows on the path is going to be a sharp edge, while the shadows on the foliage will appear softer. I also went in and darkened the backdrop area so that we can dial up the focal area even more. And lastly, where we'll be using the silhouette method for the trees flanking the path, especially the one on the right side will be the darkest, so that it really creates that peekaboo view of the path and it makes the scene feel intimate. Alright guys, we have covered a lot in today's video, but here to recap the different treatment for depicting greeneries in your scene. First is to use greeneries to create depth and atmosphere. The treatment for that is painting greeneries merely as a soft band of color connected directly to the sky. You can paint greeneries as soft or hard textures. When supporting the focal point, paint greeneries as soft textures with soft edges. If you wanted to create focal area, then make sure to use the highest contrast dry brush marks for your texture. In your composition design, place greeneries strategically to connect certain disjointed areas of your painting or to soften certain strong movements so that you can hold the viewer's attention within the scene longer. When used as a foreground or framing device, use dry brush mark to create silhouetted branches and foliages. Use bold and quick brushworks to create energetic movement while avoiding repetition. Last but not least, trees can be used as a focal object as well. We have discussed that more in length in our last tree painting video. All right, it looks like we have reached the end of today's video, which is all about using the right treatment for the right purpose of greeneries in your landscape painting. Again, I appreciate you guys watching, and please do let me know by commenting below and what other subjects or topics you would like to see in the future. Again, if you would like to charge up your skills and learn more in-depth techniques, make sure to check out the deep dive courses in October and November through my Patreon online program. And if you're watching after November 2025, just know that the classes will still be available on Patreon. I'll be standing by to answer questions. All right, guys, I hope you're enjoying this beautiful day, and I will see you in our next video. Bye.